Hello, everyone. My name is Abigail Graves. I'm the Student Engagement Coordinator with the School of Sustainability, and I'm here to welcome you to this More to Explore session. Here I am. That's me. If you're in here, you're probably interested in something regarding city life, mitigating climate change, understanding social transformation, planning for a sustainable future. If you're curious about food supply, water, energy, these things might resonate with you. And if they do, I'm here to say that we probably have a program that might fit with your interests that have you have a really fun time exploring these problems and finding solutions. Our programs, we have them broken down into Bachelors of Arts and Bachelors of Science. We've got ones that are focused on international development, policy governance, society sustainability, and sustainable urban development. So you would pick classes from these areas to complete a Bachelor of Arts program in addition to the general education and the sustainability core coursework. And then the Bachelor of Science has tracks in economics, ecosystems, energy. And then we also have launched a food systems Bachelor's of Science. So if you're interested in food systems, this might be a good option for you to consider. So we're not really here to talk about degrees necessarily. We're here to talk more about research experience. And so here is our guest today, Dr. Kailin Kroetz. She is an assistant professor and she will introduce herself, and then we will have some questions to hear more about her life and how she got here.
Great. Well, thanks for the introduction, Abby, and I'm happy to be here today. I'm an economist, and so one of the things I do in the School of Sustainability is teach the Economics of Sustainability undergraduate class. So if you end up, I guess, focused more on economics, I may see you there. And I guess the other thing we'll talk a little bit about today is research, and my main areas of research focus on fishery management and terrestrial conservation.
In terms of getting to where you have come today, can you take us back to your undergraduate experience and tell us about your initial introduction to doing research?
As an undergraduate, I started off majoring in only math, but through a freshman seminar, I became more interested in environmental and sustainability issues. It was actually a mandatory freshman seminar. You're sort of randomly assigned to a topic. And so these were things I hadn't really thought about before, but through that seminar, I became very interested in. And so I ended up, in addition to a math major, I was also an environmental studies undergraduate major. After I completed my undergraduate degree, I worked for 3 years as a consultant in more of an economics capacity. Did a lot of work on natural resource damage assessment, applied economics as things relate to more environment and resource management questions. Did a lot of work supporting government there, so recovering damages from companies that pollute or harm resources. And then after that, I went back to graduate school to get a PhD in environment and resource economics. I then spent 5 years in Washington, D.C. at a think tank, Resources for the Future. And there I did a combination of research, so academic quality research, like what I do now. But then there, instead of teaching, I did a lot of policy engagement work. And so on the front end, I spent a lot of time with stakeholders, including policymakers, trying to understand, in my case, fisheries and terrestrial conservation issues better to inform policy relevant research that I would then do. And then on the back end of the research process, I spent a lot of time thinking about how to disseminate findings, engaging with stakeholders and policymakers to think about how some of the research that I had done could be applied in the policy context. And then I guess the last step in my career is this return to academia, and I've been in the School of Sustainability not even a year yet. I think I'm our newest faculty member.
Well, I'm glad that you've joined us and hope that you're comfortable with the summer heat so far and it hasn't been too unbearable.
Right. The fun of Arizona. I did move, and I moved in August last year. So
you had a taste of it.
I had a taste, yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting that you do research. It's funny you have this background in like fisheries and stuff, and now you're in a desert. And I'm assuming that you can still do some research when it comes to fisheries. So
in Arizona?
I mean, with the technology these days, right?
Yeah. So a lot of the research that I do is more quantitative and model-based. So to a certain extent, and one of the things that I guess we can think of, especially in times like these, most of the research that I do, or the bulk of my time, is spent in front of a computer. So not necessarily like some ecologists who may be spending time in the field or things like that. So to a certain extent, even being in Arizona, I travel. I've been up to Alaska, do some work in Alaska fisheries, done some work related to Peru and Chile fisheries. I've been down there. And so in some ways, moving here hasn't changed my research trajectory related to fisheries that much. But I guess we'll see what the future holds.
I think that this is probably one of the best examples of how human policy can influence ecosystems. And so I guess one question I have is kind of deviating from how did you come to your area of interest, but do you have any the stories of impact where humans have changed a policy or a behavior that has resulted in a healthier ecosystem?
Well, I guess when I think about the fisheries context in general, the U.S. Magnuson-Stevens Act is generally viewed as a really powerful policy. And one of the things that we did here in the United States was we closed our EEZ, so our own sort of border to foreign fishing, and started managing it ourselves, and have been relatively successful in terms of, especially in the last 20, 30, 40 years, managing our stocks to a sustainable level. And so that has really come about, I think, because of a lot of great work that ecologists have done. So on one hand, we have policy to back us up now. We think about implementing and are required to implement rebuilding plans for stocks that fall too low. Those have been designed with a lot of input by ecologists. And I guess I'll bring in the economics a little bit. I think to a certain extent, then in terms of the evolution of fishery management policy in the US, we saw a lot of movement in terms of thinking not just about ecologically sustainable, but how do we think about generating profit from these fisheries? How do we think about supporting livelihoods? And to a certain extent, I think that the next phase of policy in the US was very much geared toward being more economically efficient. How many boats do we really need? We don't need to build a whole lot more boats than will actually end up on the water, for example. I think now we've entered a little bit of a third phase where we're thinking not just about the ecology and the economics, but we're also thinking about the equity implications. And so, once again, under the Magnuson-Stevens Act, there's the National Standard 8, which requires us to think about more distributional, sort of small-scale fisher community sorts of impacts. And, that's come around because of a lot of good, original, sort of academic research that's made its way into policy. I think that how we implement these sort of policies that would promote equity is still up for debate, and something that I'm working on and a bunch of other folks are thinking about now. So I guess to wrap this around, I think there's a lot more potential to sort of keep going and thinking about how we balance these different objectives, particularly as we think about shifting fish stocks, climate change, a lot of these sort of stressors that fishers are facing in the US and really worldwide.
One of the things that I had heard recently that I thought was a very good description was that when you make something so efficient, it becomes very brittle and fragile. And so if you have these corporations that have made fishing so efficient, it's totally broken some of the smaller local food chains, I think. And if we have overfishing issues and what populations are being impacted. So I think that I had never thought about where my fish had come from until I came to the School of Sustainability. So I know that I'm thinking about that a lot more, especially after meeting you. Seriously, just having a conversation, just thinking about it makes you change your perspective on things. To revert back to what you're doing now as a SOS instructor, can you tell us a little bit about what your research currently is, and then if you are mentoring any undergrads or graduates?
Yeah, so I have sort of multiple areas of research in the fishery space. So we touched a little bit on one a moment ago, thinking about resilience of fishing communities in the face of climate change. And so, Abby, you talked a little bit about how, or I think alluded to a bit, how can we keep folks fishing and providing fishes food? And one of the things that am very interested in thinking about is how the potential for fishers to diversify across different fisheries may impact their ability to sustain fishing as a livelihood as fish stocks shift and these communities experience climate change. One of the things related to that I'm thinking about as well relates to the federal fishery disaster aid policy. So there's a very specific instance of me as a researcher looking at a policy, evaluating how that policy has been performed in the past. The longer run goal of thinking about how might it be designed to better meet society's needs and goals in the future. And that's motivated in part by, and I guess so maybe folks on this call will be familiar in the agricultural context. There's agricultural insurance. So farmers can buy insurance to help them survive in bad years. And that actually doesn't exist in fisheries. And so this federal disaster aid policy ends up being one of the few more formal tools that exist in our sort of fishery management toolkit to support fishers during these bad years in the face of a sort of stock collapse. So that's one thing that I've got actually some summer interns working with me on now. And then I guess another example of some work that I have going on now that I think Abby is familiar with relates to seafood mislabeling and certification. So thinking back to fish as food and folks as consumers, how do they make decisions? Are they willing to pay potentially for certified seafood that may be more environmentally or socially sustainable? And if so, can we understand that process better and use our understanding to improve these programs, potentially change them to support increased sustainability across these margins? So Abby, I guess I see in the question box a question, and I'm wondering, should we jump over to that?
Yeah, I can mention something about this. The School of Sustainability has a track in ecosystems where we have a couple of electives that you could take in the realm of marine biology, depending on if they're available to you and what the class schedule is like. But then I know a number of students who really want like a biology taste will double major in biological sciences, and there's a conservation track. And then I'm not sure if there's a marine biology, but the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences has a ton of major options. And if Kailin is dropping links, maybe he can drop one to the academic search programs, or I can too. And then you can kind of explore like how to put those together.
Yeah, and I can actually jump in. So some of the certification work that I was just talking about, so people might have heard of MSC certification or Seafood Watch. So Seafood Watch is ratings, MSC is more of a certification kind of program. And Leah Gerber is in the School of Life Sciences, and she and I have connected. She's thinking about some of these topics as well. So for folks trying to unravel the ASU landscape, I am as well. But there are a lot of really, really tremendous folks working on marine-oriented issues at ASU, I guess, despite the fact that we're landlocked. But I think this also generally sort of speaks to the research climate at ASU, and that folks are coming in here often from different places, different backgrounds, and are experts in different things. And especially I'm impressed by how, I guess, large ASU is, and therefore how many different and sort of diverse research interests are represented here.
It's great. It's one of the benefits is that you've got so many options, and then one of the drawbacks is like, oh man, you have like so many options. And
I don't know how people choose classes. Yes, classes and majors, and so and I just one of the things anecdotally I think I've noticed is a lot of the school sustainability students do seem to be very connected, often to one or more other, and maybe a major, or I don't know. Abby can help me out with the right words here. But I think that often they do bring sort of expertise or this other lens that they've developed through other coursework, and it motivates some of their thinking that at least I've been exposed to it in our school sustainability here.
Oh yeah, the undergrad major has a required related discipline. So it's either most students complete it with a minor or a certificate. There's like a certain number of credits that you need to take in a certain area that all kind of go in a theme. That's why a minor is a really easy choice to fulfill that related discipline area. But we really have like the biggest dose in terms of like systems thinking, future thinking, resonating with other cultures, that sort of the sustainability concrete skills that you need in terms of your thought processes, and then to pair it with what industry area are you really interested in having a career in, because I think that you could be a sustainability professional in so many different areas. And so it makes it exciting and a little overwhelming, but also like such a great place to be because everybody also wants to like work towards the shared goal of making a better world for everyone. Bridget and Kailin are really excited. We actually have a minor too. So like any student in any major that's not like a sustainability program also has the option to minor with us as well. So you get like 2 kind of sustainability core classes and then a list of electives, and then you work with your major advisor to pick upper division that like match with what you're doing. Sustainability is trying to be accessible to anybody at ASU, at least a taste of it in some way. Hopefully a large concentration is our students. That's our favorite, obviously. Let's see, we've got a little bit of time left. How about what is being an instructor like? So in addition to research, you also are working with students in your classes. Can you give us any tips in terms of what prospective college students need to know?
Ooh, that's a tough question. Maybe it's easier to say some things people shouldn't do or shouldn't know.
That's fine.
No, I really like the students so far. And so I should caveat this and say, I've been here about a year, and you'd see me within the School of Sustainability teaching the economics of sustainability. And generally, my areas of expertise fit more on the quantitative and more mathematical method side. I've really enjoyed working with the students in the School of Sustainability. I think actually, and I have to confess this, the class I teach is one of the harder and more quantitative classes
that for them.
Many of the students take. But I'm excited about it. I really enjoyed sort of exposing students to economics and thinking about how economics tools and concepts can be used, and maybe also how that language is important to be familiar with when we're thinking about, especially policy. How do we talk about designing and implementing policy to bring about change? And I work with an ecologist, and she works a lot with economists. And one of the reasons that she said she likes that collaboration is because the ecologists know what we need to do from a conservation perspective. They've got the science down. But at the end of the day, the budget is the constraint. And when we think about society, we are constrained in terms of where we put our resources. And so, do we spend it thinking, more about terrestrial conservation and species preservation? Or, do we spend it more on education or health? And this comes down to dollars and cents. And so to a certain extent, being able to sort of talk that talk, I think is important to have your voice heard sometimes in the room.
For sure. I don't know if I could provide numbers to back up some of the things that I would like to see change, but I'm sure that it adds a lot of weight to your argument if you can.
Yeah, so I think there's another question.
Sustainability study abroad option. So you're new to ASU, but don't worry, if you want to do a study abroad, there's probably the opportunity in the future if you'd like to. Both Kailin and Bridget have, I think, Kailin, have you done study abroad stuff? I know Bridget has. Our study abroad programs are accessible to students in any major. And so if you're interested in that, you can always check them out. I know this year is kind of a weird year, so not a lot of study abroad happening right now. But in the future, we're definitely going to be offering programs and welcome students from other majors for sure. We're recruiting them to the sustainability sides, of course.
And Abby, I think Chloe was asking, what are some of the areas of study in the School of Sustainability?
I can throw that slide back up if you did. We can share that screen again. Sorry, I missed that. My chat box is very small.
Yeah, I know. I like at the beginning, I have this on my big screen, so I try to.
Oh, I'm gonna put up our.
Well, I'll just reply generally, Chloe. I mean, I feel like so many questions can be looked at through a lens related to sustainability. So it seems like the topics that folks are interested in are really quite broad.
These are our major, like how they're divided up in terms of what their track focus is. But the track is like something that you have a list of electives. It's not like your track is going to be everything to your degree plan. Like everybody takes general education, everybody does the core sustainability coursework, and then your track is only going to be 2 classes from a list of electives in one of these areas. And then you have a related discipline that would complement it. And so a lot of these students will pick their track depending on what their related discipline kind of complements, and it kind of depends on where you want to go and what do you see yourself doing, which can be a challenge because I know at 18 I know that what I saw myself doing was not what I saw myself doing when I was graduating college, but we hope to help you envision that and make sure you're in the right place while you get there. For example, our students will do something like if policy and governance is really important and they want to stay local, they might double major in Spanish or have a minor in Spanish. Urban dynamics is often paired with urban planning. The ecosystems of sustainability might be paired with a biological sciences program, either a minor or certificate or something. And so we'll have students that really have a foot in a number of different industry areas. Some students are interested in like fashion design. And so they might do society and sustainability and then do a minor in the Herberger School for the Design and the Arts. We have lots of options, so.
And the other one I see a lot is WP Carey with the economics of sustainability.
WP Carey offers a great business minor that I know a number of our sustainability students have done a business minor to continue developing that, like my business language and what those profit-driven expectations are, and then coupling it with my need to satisfy keeping the health of the planet. I hear some interesting things about the business school. They like money, apparently. But you can't drink money and you can't eat it. These are some of the areas that I think like are what I hear most often students are interested in. So if you decouple the idea of like what your major like is called and think more about like what are the things you're excited to study, these are like the major industry, they're not all interested, but like major areas. A lot of city planning, a lot of people are renewable and alternative energy advocates, either on the policy side or working for one of those organizations. Water obviously is a huge issue, especially here in Arizona. We even have the Decision Center for a Desert City that works a lot with water use decisions. And they have like this really cool model of like pulling different levers of influence of like policy and usage and all sorts of stuff. And it'll show you outcomes of like what your water supply would look like based on different things. Obviously, food is something that we're very interested in now. Climate change has always been a topic of concern. And then social transformation is really important, right? That equity and making sure that everybody has access and they're not being disproportionately impacted. And then planning a future. I have always kind of thought that it's hard to think about what am I doing next year. So what are we doing in the next 100 years is definitely a practice you have to become good at. Oh, I have one last, I'm sorry to cut you off with questions, but we are at 4 o'clock, have a couple of session options for our attendee that's left in the room. So if they're interested in what other things are coming up, I'm gonna just leave that up there. And if there's any questions, take more questions. Other than that, I think we're approaching time. All of our sessions will be on YouTube. Awesome. Thank you, Nicole. All right. Thank you so much for your time. I'm glad that you were able to come talk to us for a little bit about what we're doing research is like and how you got involved with it. And we are going to be doing this again tomorrow at 5 o'clock. So if people want to join us then, we will join us then. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much.